disagreements ultimately reached a breaking point, leading to the outbreak of the Civil War as both sides sought to defend their economic interests and way of life. While this theory may be convincing, others do not agree with the story.
Oh, okay. So it's not primarily slavery. It's not because of the economics. That's what I was expecting.
Some argue that the...
Hello, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Johan, and I'm just a typical Dutchman. And I'm reacting to videos about Europe and the US, or about the US and US history, or US living, or the differences between the US and Europe. So today I'm gonna react to the biggest lie in America history, busted. Mythbusters, the biggest lie in American history. So I'm curious what that lie is because I also did some history before I went into the rest. So I start with subscribe and a like. And now let's take a look about what this lie is about the American history. Let's take a look at the volume.
When the Civil War broke out, supposedly, Mr. Lincoln wanted to free the slaves.
When the Civil War broke out, supposedly. No, the Civil War was broken out, but I guess the sentence was wrongly formulated.
But according to his own words, he really didn't care whether America had slaves or not. He really wanted to save the Union.
The average young man at the time was not going to go to war to defend some rich guy's slaves.
Southerners, Southern plantation owners, were an aristocracy that did not want that. They wanted to use slavery and expand slavery into the new territories. What caused the Civil War? The clash.
What caused the Civil War? Was it truly about getting rid of slavery once and for all?
As far as I know of the videos that I've seen and reacted to, they are on my channel. It was mainly, I know there are other reasons, but it was mainly because of the slavery of the North states that don't needed slaves because they have factories, and the Southern states who had plantations needed cheap labor to make the products and to do stuff. So, and to prevent and to keep the Union in balance about how many slave states and how many non-slave states were, that went to the expansion. Yeah, I don't know if it's, yeah, okay. But my opinion, as far as I know, it was about slavery and human rights of the United States. So I'm curious, let's see.
Or were there other factors at play? Did Lincoln genuinely not care about the slaves? Take a look at what Lincoln said in a letter to American journalist and former New York Tribune editor Horace Greeley on August 22, 1862, which can be found on the Library of Congress website. The controversial part is transcribed as, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it." That controversial line may just be enough proof that Lincoln only cared about keeping the Union of the United States and not to free the slaves. But there's actually more to it than just that.
Yeah, because I thought it was also about economics of this, because the southern countries, the southern states had slaves, and because they had slave labor, they have to pay tariffs to brought in the goods to the northern states and to encourage the southern states to leave, to abandon their slave practices. So it was also an economic part of this, let's say, discussion between those two parties in the United States.
As we uncover the reality behind those words, let's first take a moment together to learn what the Civil War truly was, the theories revolving around it, and the real agenda behind it. The American Civil War stands as one of the most defining and consequential moments in United States history and in the history of the black community. Lasting from 1861 to 1865, it was a time when the nation was torn apart, with families and communities divided by conflicting loyalties. A time when the fate of the African Americans relied on the hands of their oppressors. Certainly the impact of the Civil War was far beyond the battlefields, as it changed the trajectory of American society, politics, and identity. Ultimately, it was a struggle over the fundamental principles upon which the United States was founded. It was a clash of ideologies, a test of resolve, and a reckoning with the nation's original sin, slavery, or is it? While the war is often simplified into a story of northern states versus southern states or Union versus Confederacy, the reality is far more complex. Throughout history, scholars, historians, and ordinary citizens have offered a variety of theories to explain why the Civil War broke out and what decided its outcome, ultimately freeing all slaves. But which of them is the most accurate or compelling remains a subject of debate and further study. Let's take a look at the most prominent ones, starting with the story that the majority of historians agree with. In today's historical consensus, most experts point to slavery and the treatment of African Americans as the central issues that led to the Civil War. The southern states wanted to keep slavery and have more control over their own laws, while the northern states wanted to end slavery and wanted the federal government to have authority over those issues, rather than leaving it up to individual states to decide their own laws on the matter. Before the war, the term Union referred to the government and states that remained loyal to the federal government and did not withdraw from the US.
That's what I understand it too, from the parts that I've seen.
It's important to note, however, that not every Southern or Confederate soldier fought to preserve slavery, nor was it the initial intention of the North to go to war just to end it. The soldiers had various reasons for fighting,
This is World War II.
including survival and loyalty to their comrades, and initially, the North's main goal was to preserve the Union, not to abolish slavery. But emancipation or freedom from slavery became the primary aim for the approximately 200,000 African Americans who served in the war on the Union side. Interestingly, many Americans today are not aware of what really happened in the U.S. Civil War.
What was the cause of the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War in the 1800s?
What was the cause of the Civil War?
What do you think the cause
Oh, wow. Yeah? Again, a Trump supporter?
of the Civil War was?
I don't know.
What would you say is the cause of the Civil War?
The Civil War? What caused the Civil War? They mostly, I'm thinking of the first war when we became Americans.
And then we had a Civil War. What do you think caused our Civil War?
Sin, I suppose.
Oh, sad. And is this because it's not taught to you in the schools, or simply that it's a fact we learned, we got our degree and went on, and we never... Yeah, but you you celebrate 4th of July because that's independence, but you don't, yeah.
You know, there was something evil. Mankind is hard on each other, man.
Or how slavery originated in the land. Perhaps it is a sign of apathy, or maybe just a shortcoming of educational systems. Trump supporters, clueless about what caused the Civil War, the roots.
Now, he specifically recalls Trump supporters. I've seen also non-Trump supporters that are clueless about something that's about their history that even I know, but they didn't.
Of the slavery crisis can actually be traced back to the nation's founding. When European settlers arrived in the Americas in the 1500s, they brought with them a system of slavery. As other sources of cheap labor became scarce, white settlers increasingly turned to African slaves. By the early 1700s in British North America, slavery was predominantly African. Southern plantations relied on slave labor to produce lucrative crops like tobacco, rice, and indigo, which fueled the profitability of the American colonies. Many northern merchants also profited from the slave trade or the products of slave labor. Although slavery existed in all 13 colonies at the start of the American Revolution in 1775, Some Americans, particularly those of African descent, recognized the contradiction between the Declaration of Independence's assertion of human equality and the reality of slavery.
Yeah, it is.
In response, northern states began to phase out slavery after the Revolution, while the future of slavery in the South remained uncertain, with hopes that it might eventually fade away there as well. But when the U.S. Constitution was drafted in 1787, the influence of slaveholders and those who benefited from slavery couldn't be ignored. Even though slaves themselves couldn't vote, Southern white landowners argued that slave labor was important for the sake of the nation's prosperity. As a result, the Constitution included provisions like the infamous 3/5 clause, which
Yeah, I was waiting for this. 3/5 of a person, a slave is no more than 3/5 of a person.
counted each slave as 3/5 of a person for the purposes of representation in Congress and the Electoral College. This gave the South more political power than it would have had based solely on its free population. The Constitution also included a fugitive slave law and set 1807 as the earliest year for Congress to consider ending the importation of slaves from Africa. But just when the thought of freedom for the slaves was coming into fruition, the explosion of global demand for cotton became the disruptive factor. In the early 1800s, cotton industry became a rise in the South. With the lucrative cotton industry booming, many white Southerners became convinced that slavery was essential to their prosperity and way of life. As a result, any hope that slavery might naturally fade away in the South vanished, and the
Of course, yeah. Profits.
institution became deeply ingrained in Southern society and economy. Meanwhile, in the decades leading up to 1860, Northerners increasingly embraced the idea that farmers and workers should be able to reap the rewards of their hard work and strive for self-improvement. This view clashed with the institution of slavery, which many Northerners saw as incompatible with the principles of opportunity and progress. Opposition to slavery's expansion into new territories grew, as these lands were seen as the rightful domain of ambitious free men. For instance, the proposal to admit Missouri as a slave state in 1820 ignited a fierce national debate over slavery. After much deliberation, a compromise was reached. This compromise allowed for the admission of Maine as a free state, while Missouri was a slave state. Additionally, Congress prohibited slavery in all western territories lying above the southern boundary of Missouri. However, the Missouri Compromise only temporarily eased tensions over slavery. In the 1830s, concerns about the issue resurfaced for several reasons. Firstly, a small but vocal group of abolitionists emerged in the North, advocating for the immediate end of slavery. Secondly, the Nat Turner slave rebellion in Virginia in 1831 heightened tensions, with white Southerners blaming Northern abolitionists for encouraging slave revolts. As if all those conflicts weren't enough, the U.S. victory in the Mexican War of 1846 to 1848 added vast new territories to the nation, reigniting debates over the status of slavery in these.
I commented that video too. If you want to see, it's in the channel. And while you're down here, like and subscribe to the channel to see more reactions from me on the US
areas. The Compromise of 1850 was devised to address these issues, particularly as California sought admission to the Union. This compromise included the admission of California as a free state, a stronger fugitive slave law, assurances that Congress would not interfere with the interstate slave trade in the South, and the prohibition of the slave trade in the District of Columbia. However, the compromise left the status of slavery in other newly acquired territories unresolved. Amidst mounting tensions over slavery, a new political party emerged in the North during the 1850s. The Republicans. The Republicans' central platform was the prohibition of slavery in the territories. They were the first party in American history to draw their support primarily from one region, the North. Predictably, this stirred deep resentment and anger in the South. The failed attempt by abolitionist John Brown to incite a slave uprising in Virginia in 1859 added fuel to the fire. Brown's actions struck fear and alarm throughout the South, reinforcing the belief that Northern abolitionists were actively seeking to undermine Southern society. The presidential election of 1860 only highlighted the significant divides between different regions of the United States. Within the Democratic Party, there was disagreement over slavery, leading to two candidates being nominated. Meanwhile, the Republicans nominated Abraham Lincoln of Illinois, whose
Yeah, okay.
platform
Still nothing new. So waiting to the point that it's actually being busted.
included government support for infrastructure projects and protective tariffs to bolster American industry, alongside the prohibition of slavery in the territories. Lincoln's victory in the election was achieved by sweeping the northern states, while failing to get even one electoral vote from the South. This clear win was viewed by the South as the first step toward ending slavery altogether, a prospect they did not approve of. As a result, 7 states from the South,
I've seen this picture many times.
South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, and Texas, withdrew from the Union, becoming part of the Confederate States of America, commonly referred to as the Confederacy. Lincoln, fervently hoping to preserve the Union without resorting to war, faced a very important decision. But when he opted to resupply the U.S. Army stationed at Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, Confederate forces responded by opening fire on the fort. In response to this act of aggression, Lincoln issued a call for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion. This call to arms further escalated tensions and prompted 4 more states, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas, to join the Confederacy. With the withdrawal of these additional states, the nation found itself plunged into civil war. Many professionals believe that this is the story that led to the Civil War, but some believe that there are more factors to consider to be able to identify the real cause of the said war.
Okay, so this part is what I also have seen in other videos as what led up to the Civil War. And now he's going to discuss some other theories. But are those proven?
The first factor to consider is the economic conflict of the North and South. In the South, slavery played a big role in the economy, particularly in the plantation system, which heavily depended on enslaved labor to cultivate profitable crops like
cheap labor, or low-paid labor.
Cotton, tobacco, and rice. Meanwhile, the North was experiencing rapid industrialization, with a shift towards
They use factories with, I guess, steam engines.
manufacturing and urbanization. This economic model did not rely on slavery and was based more on wage labor and technological advancements. With that, the North developed a different economic outlook and became increasingly opposed to the institution of slavery. These economic differences created tensions between the North and South, as each region had contrasting views on the role of slavery in society and the economy. The industrialized North saw slavery as incompatible with its economic principles, while the agrarian South viewed it as essential to its economic survival. As the North and South diverged economically, conflicts arose over issues such as tariffs, taxation, and the expansion of slavery into new territories. These disagreements ultimately reached a breaking point, leading to the outbreak of the Civil War as both sides sought to defend their economic interests and way of life. While this theory may be convincing, others do not agree with the story.
Oh, okay. So it's not primarily slavery. It's not because of the economics. That's what I was expecting.
Some argue that the cause of the war was economic. The North was industrial and the South agrarian. And so the two lived in such economically different societies that they could no longer stay together. Not true. In the middle of the
Not true. Okay.
19th century, both North and South were agrarian societies. In fact, the North produced far more food crops than did the South. But Northern farmers had to pay their farmhands, who were free to come and go as they pleased, while Southern plantation owners exploited slaves over whom they had total control.
Aside from this, there is another theory that circulated not long after the war ended. The theory suggests that slavery was not the reason for the Civil War. Instead, it was the states' rights. During the period leading up to and during the Civil War, there were clear and well-documented statements by Confederate leaders indicating that slavery was indeed the primary cause of the conflict. However, in the aftermath of the war, a revisionist narrative known as the Lost Cause emerged. This narrative sought to downplay the role of slavery and instead portrayed the Confederacy as defenders of states' rights and the
States' rights.
Constitution. This revisionist history was pushed by various groups, including the United Daughters of the Confederacy, who erected monuments, influenced textbooks, and spread a different view of the Civil War across generations. Despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, this myth persists today, contributing to a
Myth. So now it's a myth again.
widespread confusion of the true causes of the Civil War. However, one has to wonder, if the Confederacy is defending states' rights, what exactly are those rights aside from the right to own and use slaves? In many southern states, people had various reasons for fighting in the Civil War. While some were wealthy plantation owners who owned slaves, not everyone who fought for the Confederacy was in that position. Many of them were ordinary people who felt a strong sense of loyalty to their state and saw the war as a defense against what they perceived as Northern aggression. One interesting point is that the war wasn't solely about slavery for everyone. For some, it was more about standing up to what they felt was unfair treatment by the North.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
They saw themselves as defending their homes and families rather than fighting to preserve slavery. Some historians also compare the Civil War to the American
Loyalty to the state. Yeah.
Revolution, emphasizing the issue of states' rights. They argue that the South believed it had the right to leave the Union if it wanted to, while the North disagreed. This difference of opinion is believed by some to have ultimately led to war.
It's reasonable to assess that no Confederate soldier fought for the right to own slaves, as none of them did. It was only a very small portion of wealthy plantation and factory owners who did. The soldiers were not mobilized under the view that slavery must be defended. They were mobilized under the view that Union soldiers were rampaging through their state and threatening their families.
Now, after hearing different sides of this
Okay. We need to defend ourselves. Just pick up arms, form a militia, and defend yourself.
story, it's time to go back to what Lincoln had said. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. This quote, widely circulated on social media platforms, was clarified by a Reuters article, revealing that while Lincoln did utter these words, their context differs significantly from the prevailing perception, with many wrongly assuming Lincoln opposed the freedom of the slaves. The complete sentence in the letter emphasizes that Lincoln considers not freeing slaves as just one possible approach among others, such as freeing all slaves. He expresses his primary goal as preserving the Union, stating that if he could achieve this without freeing any slaves, he would do so. Here are his exact words. My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or to destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save this Union.
The right context of the full sentence. Yeah. Often reason enough for wars to fought over because people assume something while it's not the entirely truth or not seen in the right context.
By the time he wrote those words, Lincoln had already decided on the final option, which involved freeing some slaves while leaving others alone, as outlined in the Emancipation Proclamation. He presented this proclamation to his cabinet a month before writing the letter. While the quote is confirmed to be from the letter to Greeley, experts agree that its meaning is best interpreted within the context of its historical and written background. In the letter, Lincoln affirms his belief that his main obligation as president during the Civil War is to preserve the Union. By emphasizing the importance of maintaining the Union as his primary responsibility and goal, Lincoln aims to contextualize anti-slavery efforts within the broader scope of his duties and the North's objectives in the war. His words were not exactly empowering for African Americans, but contrary to some interpretations, Lincoln is not indicating a preference for inaction against slavery. It was even believed that this public letter intended to persuade the Northern public that it was possible to take action against slavery, an idea that freeing the slaves could help bring the Union back together. But of course, even the Emancipation is not free of controversy. The Emancipation Proclamation, issued by Lincoln during the Civil War, had limited impact on freeing enslaved individuals as it didn't apply to loyal border states or areas under Union control. Despite its shortcomings, it spurred abolitionist efforts. Around 200,000 black men served in the Union forces during the war, and Lincoln advocated for their right to vote. The 13th Amendment, ratified after Lincoln's death, ultimately ended slavery nationwide.
13th Amendment. Okay. Says outside the Bill of Rights, the 13th Amendment.
While this may seem like the perfect ending in a history book, one thing not discussed enough is what happened after emancipation. The reality of actually freeing the slaves was far more complicated. You would think that once freed, the slaves would leave the plantations as fast as possible. However, many ex-slaves, especially older ones, decided to stay and make...
Yeah, because they get money, maybe not enough, and they get fed and housing. So, yeah, you will be out of a job, out of money, and out of a home. So, yeah.
Made deals with their former masters to work for pay. In some cases, the news of emancipation led to immediate departures from the plantations, especially among younger, healthier individuals who quickly became part of the Union Army through Union recruiters that informed the slaves of their freedom. These recruiters' actions and those of others spread the word of emancipation to thousands of slaves. There was this initial joy followed by anxiety among ex-slaves over the responsibilities of freedom. Fortunately, many of them embraced the newfound independence and thrived in their new start at life.
The Emancipation Proclamation actually freed very few people. Since Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation as a military measure, it actually didn't even apply to border slave states like Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, who were loyal to the Union. Lincoln also exempted selected areas of the Confederacy that had already come under Union control, hoping to gain the support of white populations in those states. The proclamation was aimed at destabilizing the South, where Lincoln's government had no control, and also no ability to enforce the freedom of any enslaved people. The proclamation did, however, provide a further step for abolitionists to continue pushing for an actual end to slavery. By the time the Civil War ended, around 200,000 black men had served in the Union Army and Navy. In his final speech in 1865, Lincoln argued that any black man who had served the Union during the Civil War should have the right to vote. It was the 13th Amendment, adopted on December 18, 1865, after Lincoln's assassination, which more comprehensively ended the institution of slavery.
After all of this, only one question remains. Did Abraham Lincoln genuinely care for the slaves and is worthy to be called the Great Emancipator? We'll leave the answer to you, our valued viewers. Thank you for staying until...
Yeah, let me know in the comments too. I want to know, what do you think about it? Because the question is, do you think that he was actually... Yeah, my opinion, yeah, because I wanted to keep the Union together so that everyone was, quote-unquote, happy, had no war, no disagreements, all done in politics, so it will be better for everyone in the entire Union, and everyone means also the slaves. So, yeah, I think that he generally cared for the slaves, and I did not know that he was called the Great Emancipator. But let me know in the comments what you think about this question. I want to know. If you like the video, then maybe you like this one too. And leave a like, subscribe, that's this button I believe, and leave a comment. Let me know. What do you think about this video, and what kind of video I should react? If you want a video that I should react to, then let me know in a comment. I will react to all the comments. And subscribe, because it will mean the world to me. And we will see each other in that video. No, in this video.